Welcome back to The Throw-In. I'm Ethan Brander.
And I'm Max Von Gries.
Today we are going to talk about a crazy Week 9 and preview how we think players will perform next week. Let's start with one of the most dramatic developments in the NFL in Odell Beckham Jr. OBJ has officially cleared waivers and is now a free agent. When the Browns traded for Beckham Jr. 2 seasons ago, it was expected that he was going to be a huge part of the new and improved Browns offense. But since the Browns can never have nice things, OBJ was plagued by injuries and inconsistent play during his time in Cleveland. Honestly, I feel bad for Cleveland fans. They've been through so much, and now to have one of the faces of their franchise leave like this is just more embarrassment for a franchise that is historically down bad. Depending on where OBJ signs, he could return to having meaningful fantasy value. News broke today that the Patriots have been in contact with him. And if he were to go to New England, he would automatically be an upgrade over the current wide receiver 1 in Jacoby Myers. Another team that has been linked to him is the Green Bay Packers. According to NFL insider Jordan Schultz, OBJ has set Green Bay as his #1 destination. Him pairing up with Rodgers and Adams would be a force to be reckoned with, as he would likely step into the Packers' wide receiver 2 role almost immediately, replacing Allen Lazard. If this were to happen, OBJ would be a low-end wide receiver 2 or a high-end flex. Now, Max, how's our boy Lamar doing?
Yeah, Lamar Jackson led his Ravens to an absolutely gut-wrenching victory, unfortunately, over my Minnesota Vikings over the weekend in overtime this Sunday. I was in a difficult situation because, Lamar's my starting quarterback, but the Vikings are my team. So who do I root for? And eventually, I remember I was just wearing my Viking jersey in my room, getting excited about Lamar throwing a passing touchdown. So I was in a very weird situation, that's for sure. Lamar had a casual 266 yards in the air for 2 touchdowns, which generated 33 points for my fantasy team. He also had 120 yards rushing, and you should be able to expect this type of production from Truz the next week as they up against a Dolphins team that absolutely stinks. Lamar Jackson plays exactly like how I used to play football in elementary school during recess. No joke. I would run around kids left and right, and I promise you I won recess football MVP that year. I was a sleeper pick in the draft before we would start, and that's for sure. But Ethan, I think there's a tight end in the AFC North that is under the radar that some of our viewers might want to look at.
Yeah, Max. Steelers rookie Pat Freiermuth had himself a game, tallying up 21.3 fantasy points on a 2-touchdown, 43-yard performance, where he caught all but 1 of his 5 targets. Freiermuth is now sitting at 15th among tight ends, but he's only rostered in 32% of ESPN fantasy leagues. So check your waiver wires, because if he's still there, Freiermuth is a great pickup. Now, his performance against the Bears was great, but that was not the big story from that game. Coming from a Packers fan standpoint, the Bears got fleeced by the refs. The Bears had 12 penalties for 112 yards. It seemed that whenever the Bears made a big play, it came back because of some awful call. The Cassius Marsh taunting penalty was one of the worst calls I have seen this season. If it wasn't for the refs this game, I really believe that the Bears would have won. Me being a Packer fan and Max being a Vikings fan, we're not going to complain about the Bears losing. But this loss may be a sticking point come the postseason, as this may have knocked the Bears out of the playoff hunt. Chicago is now 3-6, putting them 2 games behind the current 7-seed Atlanta Falcons. If they hadn't lost this game, they'd be sitting 1 game back of the Falcons. Now, how's John Taylor doing?
Jonathan Taylor and the Colts stampeded all over Robert Saleh and the New York Jets over the weekend with a high-scoring 45-30 victory. Taylor and the Colts have finally found their groove with the run game, which allowed Taylor to have a monster game with 172 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. I believe that this Colts team is one of the most underrated rushing attacks in the league. Quentin Nelson out of Notre Dame is one of the best offensive linemen in the league. And I think that when you pair him with a great running back like Jonathan Taylor, you get a chemistry that a lot of teams just cannot stop. If the Colts run game continues to be stout, you should continue to start Taylor at running back 1 for your fantasy team. He's reached 100 yards on the ground the past 6 games. And I assure you that next week against a Jacksonville Jaguars team that he'll run all over Urban Meyer's defense, and that's for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. The Jaguars, they might have won this past week against the Bills, which makes no sense.
No, not at all.
Not at all. But they are still one of the worst teams in the league. They went over 400 days without winning a game in the U.S. because their win before this was in England. Now, thank you guys for watching. Tune in next week to see us break down Week 11 in the NFL. Have a great day. I'm Ethan Brander.
And I'm Max von Gries.